Have you ever noticed how strange it feels? You can spend 3 hours watching random videos without feeling tired. You can scroll through your phone until 2 in the morning. You can imagine an entire future in your head. But the moment you open the laptop to work, or sit down to study, or finally decide to change your life, it's like someone secretly unplugged your brain. Suddenly you're thirsty. Your room needs cleaning. You remember a message you forgot to reply to 3 days ago. You wonder what the weather will be tomorrow. Anything feels easier than doing the one thing you actually wanted to do. And after enough days like this, you start giving yourself a label. I'm just lazy. At first, you say it as a joke. Then you repeat it often enough that it begins to sound like the truth. Eventually, it becomes part of your identity. I'm lazy. I never finish anything. I have no discipline. I'll probably never change. What's heartbreaking is that millions of people believe this about themselves, not because someone proved it, but because they couldn't explain what was happening inside their own mind. The strange thing is, your brain almost never experiences itself as lazy. It experiences itself as trying to stay safe. That's a completely different story. What most people don't realize is that laziness isn't actually a scientific diagnosis. You won't walk into a psychologist's office and hear them say, "You've been diagnosed with laziness." Instead, researchers study things like motivation, stress, reward systems, attention, emotion, fear, executive function, habits, burnout, anxiety, and depression. Because these are the things that quietly shape what we call laziness. Think about someone trying to run with a backpack full of rocks. From far away, it looks like they're not trying very hard. But if you could see the weight they're carrying, you'd stop judging them. The same thing happens inside the mind. People only see your actions. They don't see the invisible weight, the fear of failing, the pressure to be perfect, the exhaustion from constantly worrying. The voice that says, "If you can't do it perfectly, don't do it at all." The stress your nervous system has been carrying for years. The endless comparisons with people who seem to have everything figured out. None of those things are visible. So people simplify the story. You're lazy. Sometimes, the loudest person saying it is you. Here's the strange part. If you were truly lazy, you probably wouldn't feel guilty. Think about that for a second. Real laziness would feel comfortable. You wouldn't spend every night promising yourself tomorrow would be different. You wouldn't lie awake thinking about everything you should have done. You wouldn't feel disappointed every time another day slipped away. You wouldn't watch productivity videos hoping one of them finally fixes you. You wouldn't keep searching for answers. The guilt itself is evidence that something deeper is happening. Your mind wants to move. Something is stopping it. Imagine pressing the gas pedal in a car while someone else is holding down the brakes. From outside, it looks like the car barely moves. The driver presses harder. The engine screams louder. Smoke starts rising. Eventually, the driver blames the engine. The engine is broken, but it never was. The brakes were never released. That's how many people live. That's how many people live. They push harder every Monday. Set bigger goals. Download another productivity app. Buy another notebook. Watch another motivational video. Promise themselves this time will be different. But your brain has another plan. If the brakes are emotional, no amount of pressing the gas will solve the problem. You'll only burn yourself out. Modern psychology has uncovered something fascinating. Our brains are prediction machines. Before you even begin a task, your brain quietly asks questions you never hear. Is this safe? Will this be painful? Will I fail? Will I look stupid? What if I disappoint someone? How much energy will this cost? Could I do something easier instead? These calculations happen in milliseconds, long before you're aware of making a choice. Almost nobody notices this. They think motivation disappears randomly. It doesn't. Your brain constantly predicts whether an action is worth the effort. If it predicts stress, embarrassment, uncertainty, or emotional pain, it often chooses avoidance instead. Not because you're weak, because that's exactly what brains evolved to do. Thousands of years ago, Conserving energy helped people survive. Wasting energy could mean starving later. Today, your brain still follows many of those ancient rules. The world changed much faster than our biology. Now, survival doesn't usually depend on escaping predators. It depends on finishing assignments, building businesses, learning skills, having difficult conversations, and making long-term decisions. The problem is, your brain still prefers immediate comfort over distant rewards. Scrolling gives immediate stimulation. Working often gives delayed rewards. Guess which one your brain naturally prefers? This isn't a character flaw. It's biology meeting a modern world filled with endless distractions. And companies understand this incredibly well. Every notification, every endless feed, every autoplay video, every bright red icon, every small sound your phone makes. They're all designed to compete for one thing, your attention. Not because you're weak, because your brain is wired to notice novelty. That doesn't mean you're powerless. It simply means you've been fighting a battle without knowing the rules. And that's what makes this conversation so important. Because once you understand the rules, you stop attacking yourself. You start understanding yourself. And that changes everything. But here's where the story becomes even more surprising. If laziness isn't the real problem, then what is? Why can two people have the same dream, the same amount of time, the same opportunities, yet one person takes action while the other stays frozen? The answer isn't motivation. It goes much deeper than that. And once you see it, you'll never look at laziness the same way again. Have you ever had one of those days where you genuinely wanted to get something done? Not because someone forced you, not because of a deadline, but because you actually cared. Maybe it was finally starting that business, writing the first page of a book, learning a new skill, going to the gym, studying for an exam, or simply cleaning the room you've been avoiding for weeks. You wake up with good intentions. This is the day. You make coffee, sit down, open your laptop, take one look at the task, and then something strange happens. Your body is in the chair. Your hands are on the keyboard, but your mind quietly slips away. You check your phone for just a minute. One video becomes 5. 5 becomes 30. Before you realize it, the afternoon is gone. You feel frustrated, ashamed, confused, because it doesn't make sense. If you wanted to do the work, why didn't you? Most people answer that question with a single word: laziness. But your brain tells a very different story. Think about the last time you accidentally touched a hot stove. The next time you walked past it, you were more careful. You didn't have to consciously remind yourself. Your brain remembered the pain before you did. That's one of the brain's greatest strengths. It learns from experience to protect you. But here's the strange part. Your brain doesn't only remember physical pain. It remembers emotional pain too. The embarrassment of getting the wrong answer in class. The sting of being laughed at. The disappointment of trying your hardest and still failing. The fear of letting your family down. The loneliness of feeling like you weren't enough. Every emotionally painful experience leaves a tiny mark. Not always a scar. Sometimes just a warning. Over time, those warnings become predictions. Without realizing it, your brain starts connecting certain actions with emotional danger. Writing becomes linked to criticism. Speaking up becomes linked to rejection. Starting a business becomes linked to failure. Applying for a job becomes linked to being judged. Posting online becomes linked to negative comments. So when you finally sit down to begin, your brain isn't asking, "Can you do this?" It's asking, "Is this safe?" That question changes everything. Psychologists sometimes describe this as the brain's threat detection system. Most people imagine danger as something dramatic. A speeding car, a wild animal, a burning building. But your nervous system isn't limited to physical threats. Social rejection once carried enormous consequences for our ancestors. Being excluded from the group could mean losing protection, food, or even survival. Your brain still carries traces of that ancient programming. That's why criticism can feel physically painful. That's why rejection can make your stomach drop. That's why public embarrassment can keep you awake at night years later. To your brain, emotional pain can resemble physical danger. So when a task carries even a small chance of failure, your nervous system reacts before your logical mind has a chance to speak. Your heart beats a little faster. Your breathing changes. Your muscles tighten. You don't consciously notice these signals. You only notice the result. I don't feel like doing it. Here's where many people get trapped. They think motivation comes first, then action follows. But what most people don't realize is that the opposite is often true. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Imagine standing outside a freezing swimming pool. Every second you hesitate, your brain invents more reasons not to jump. It'll be too cold. What if I regret it? I'll wait another minute. But the people already swimming aren't constantly motivating themselves. They simply got past the first few uncomfortable seconds. The hardest part wasn't swimming. It was entering the water. Work is surprisingly similar. The first sentence is harder than the 10th. The first push-up is harder than the 20th. Opening the textbook feels harder than reading page 3. The beginning carries uncertainty. And uncertainty makes the brain cautious. Researchers studying motivation have found something interesting. The brain doesn't calculate only effort. It calculates expected reward. Imagine someone offers you two choices. Carry a heavy box for 5 minutes and receive $1, or carry the same box for 5 minutes and receive $1,000. The effort stays exactly the same, but your willingness changes completely. Why? Because motivation isn't just about how hard something is. It's about whether your brain believes the reward is worth the effort. Now think about long-term goals. Learning a language, getting fit, building a career, saving money, writing a book. The rewards are real, but they're distant. Your brain struggles to feel excited about rewards it can't experience today. Now compare that with social media. You open an app. Within seconds, your brain receives novelty, entertainment, connection, surprise, tiny bursts of dopamine. Immediate rewards almost always feel more convincing than future rewards. This is why saying, "I'll just check my phone for 2 minutes," often turns into an hour. Your brain keeps finding another immediate reward, another funny video, another interesting comment, another headline, another notification. It's not that you're choosing distraction. Your reward system is being pulled toward whatever promises pleasure with the least effort. But here's something even stranger. Sometimes the task itself isn't the problem. Your identity is. Imagine two people who both dream of becoming artists. The first person thinks, "I'm learning." The second person thinks, "I have to prove I'm talented." Who feels more pressure? Who becomes more afraid of mistakes? Who avoids starting more often? The second person. Because every drawing becomes a judgment of who they are, not just what they made. This happens everywhere. Students believe grades define their intelligence. Employees believe performance defines their worth. Parents believe mistakes define their love. Creators believe views define their value. When your identity becomes attached to your performance, every task feels heavier. You're no longer risking failure. You're risking your self-worth. No wonder your brain wants to avoid it. This is why perfectionism and procrastination are often close friends. Perfectionism doesn't always sound confident. Sometimes it whispers, "If you can't do it perfectly, don't begin. If it won't be amazing, wait. You're not ready yet." That voice feels responsible, careful, even wise. But it's actually fear, wearing a clever disguise. Because every day you delay, you protect yourself from one thing: judgment. As long as the project stays unfinished, nobody can criticize it. As long as the dream stays in your head, it can't fail. The unfinished version always feels safer than the real one. But safety comes with a hidden price. Your confidence slowly disappears. Not because you lack potential, because confidence grows from evidence. Every small action tells your brain, I survived. Every avoided action tells your brain that danger must have been real. The brain learns from both action and avoidance. And that's why avoidance becomes addictive. Here's a simple exercise. The next time you catch yourself saying, "I'm lazy," pause for a moment. Ask yourself a different question. What am I protecting myself from right now? Failure? Embarrassment? Making the wrong choice? Feeling overwhelmed? Being judged? Not being perfect? Disappointing someone? You may be surprised by the answer. Because beneath procrastination, there's often an emotion quietly asking to be noticed. And once you see that emotion, you stop fighting yourself. You begin working with your brain instead of against it. This is where everything starts to change. But emotional protection isn't the only hidden force holding people back. There's another one that's even harder to recognize. It doesn't look like fear, it looks like exhaustion. And millions of people mistake it for laziness every single day. That's where we're going next. There's a moment almost everyone has experienced. You finally have a free day. No meetings, no school, no deadlines, no one asking anything from you. For weeks you've been telling yourself, if I just had one full day, I'd get my life together. So the day arrives. You wake up, make breakfast, sit on the couch for just a few minutes. Then an hour passes. Then 2. Suddenly it's evening. The entire day disappeared. You barely did anything. And somehow, you're even more tired than when you woke up. That feeling is deeply confusing. How can doing almost nothing leave you exhausted? Most people answer with the same painful sentence: "I'm just lazy." But here's the strange part. Your body can be resting while your brain is working overtime. Imagine opening your computer. Instead of one tab, there are 100. Music is playing. Emails keep arriving. Videos autoplay. Messages pop up every few minutes. Your fan starts spinning faster. Everything slows down. Not because the computer is broken, because it's trying to process too much at once. Your brain works in a surprisingly similar way. You don't just carry today's responsibilities. You carry unfinished conversations, bills you haven't paid, decisions you keep postponing, goals you started but never finished, mistakes you still replay, people you compare yourself to, problems you haven't solved, dreams you're afraid to chase. Even when you're sitting completely still, your mind may be running a marathon. That's mental exhaustion. And mental exhaustion often disguises itself as laziness. What most people don't realize is that your brain spends an enormous amount of energy making decisions. Should I work first or exercise? Should I answer that email? Should I cook or order food? Should I save money or buy this? Should I start today or tomorrow? Most of these decisions seem tiny, but together, they quietly drain your mental battery. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. The more choices you make, the harder every new decision becomes. Think about why successful people often wear similar clothes every day, or why many athletes follow strict routines. It's not because they lack creativity. It's because routines save mental energy. Every unnecessary decision steals attention from decisions that actually matter. Now imagine someone who has no routines. Every morning begins with dozens of choices. By the time they finally sit down to work, their brain already feels overloaded. Then they wonder why focusing feels impossible. Here's another hidden form of laziness: overwhelm. Imagine someone asks you to carry one book. Easy. Now imagine they hand you 50 books. You probably wouldn't even know where to begin. The problem isn't strength, it's volume. Your brain reacts the same way. I need to lose weight. I should learn a new skill. I have to fix my finances. I need a better job. I should read more. I need to stop wasting time. I have to wake up earlier. I should call my parents. I need to clean my apartment. None of these goals are bad, but together, they become mentally crushing. Instead of choosing one step, the brain sees one enormous mountain, and mountains make people freeze. Not because they're lazy, because they're overwhelmed. This is why one of the most productive questions isn't, "How do I finish everything?" It's what's the next smallest step? Your brain doesn't need the whole staircase. It only needs the next step. Now let's talk about something even more invisible: emotional exhaustion. Think about someone who smiles all day at work. They help customers, answer emails, stay polite, hide frustration, pretend everything is fine. Then they come home and collapse. Not because the work was physically difficult, because pretending is exhausting. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional labor. Managing emotions requires energy. So does worrying. So does people-pleasing. So does constantly trying not to disappoint others. Many people spend their entire day regulating emotions they never talk about. Then they blame themselves for having no energy left to work on their dreams. Here's where everything becomes even more surprising. Sometimes what looks like procrastination is actually perfectionism. Imagine a painter standing in front of a blank canvas. They've dreamed about this masterpiece for years. They know exactly how beautiful it should look. Then they pick up the brush and freeze. Why? Because reality can never match the perfect picture inside their imagination. The first brushstroke destroys perfection. So they never paint. This happens every day. People don't delay because they don't care. They delay because they care too much. They think, if I wait until I'm ready, if I learn one more thing, if I buy better equipment, if I become more confident, then I'll finally start. But readiness is a moving target. Every time you get closer, your standards move even farther away. Perfection doesn't motivate action. It postpones it. There's another psychological trap almost nobody notices. It's called learned helplessness. Imagine a dog placed in a situation where every attempt to escape fails. Eventually, even when the door is left open, the dog doesn't try anymore. Not because escape is impossible, because past experiences taught it that effort doesn't matter. Humans can develop the same pattern. Maybe you studied hard but still failed. Maybe you trusted people who hurt you. Maybe you worked hard without recognition. Maybe every time you tried to improve your life, something went wrong. After enough disappointments, your brain quietly learns, why bother? That's one of the saddest sentences a person can believe. Because once your brain expects failure, it stops investing energy. Not because success is impossible, because hope feels dangerous. The brain hates wasting energy. If it believes effort won't lead to results, it protects you by reducing motivation. Again, that's not laziness. It's survival. Think about a phone with only 1% battery. It automatically turns off certain features. Not because they're broken, because it's trying to stay alive. Your brain does something similar during prolonged stress. It conserves resources. Concentration drops. Creativity shrinks. Motivation disappears. Even simple tasks begin to feel enormous. From the outside, people might say, you need more discipline. But discipline can't fully solve an exhausted nervous system. Recovery matters too. Here's a question worth asking yourself. When was the last time you truly rested? Not distracted, not scrolling, not binge-watching, not worrying while lying in bed. Actually rested. There's a difference. Distraction fills time. Rest restores energy. Many people confuse the two. Hours of scrolling often leave you feeling emptier than before, because your attention never actually recovered. It was simply redirected. Real rest allows your brain to slow down, to process, to breathe, to reset. Without that recovery, even small responsibilities begin to feel heavy. So the next time you call yourself lazy, pause. Look beneath the surface. Are you overwhelmed? Emotionally drained? Carrying too many decisions? Afraid of imperfection? Protecting yourself from disappointment? Running on an empty mental battery? The answer is often yes. And once you stop treating the symptom, you can finally start addressing the cause. But there's one hidden cause we've barely touched. It begins much earlier than adulthood. Long before your first job, long before your first failure, long before you ever called yourself lazy. It starts in childhood. And without realizing it, those early experiences may still be shaping every goal you chase today. Think back to when you were a child, not to one specific memory, just the feeling. The feeling of bringing home a drawing you were proud of, a test you studied hard for, a story you wanted someone to hear, a small achievement that felt huge to you. Now ask yourself something. What happened next? Did someone smile and say, "I'm proud of you"? Or did they immediately point out what was missing? Why isn't it 100? Your cousin did better. You could have tried harder. This isn't good enough. For many people, these moments seemed small, just ordinary conversations. But your brain wasn't hearing ordinary words. It was learning the rules of love. As children, we don't simply learn language. We learn what makes us feel safe. We learn what earns attention. We learn when we're accepted. And most importantly, we learn what happens when we fail. A child doesn't have years of life experience to interpret criticism. They don't think, "Mom is stressed today," or "Dad had a difficult week." Instead, they often reach a much simpler conclusion: something must be wrong with me. That belief rarely forms in one dramatic moment. It forms slowly. One comment, one comparison, one disappointed look, one ignored success, one impossible expectation at a time. Eventually, the child stops asking, "Did I make a mistake?" and starts believing, "I am the mistake." There's a huge difference between those two sentences. One describes an action, the other becomes an identity. Psychologists who study attachment theory have found that our earliest relationships often shape how we approach challenges later in life. Imagine two children learning to ride a bicycle. The first falls. Their parent laughs gently, helps them stand, and says, "It's okay, falling is part of learning." The second falls. Their parent sighs in frustration. Maybe they criticize, maybe they compare, maybe they walk away. Both children experienced the same fall, but their brains recorded completely different lessons. One learned, mistakes are safe. The other learned, mistakes are dangerous. Fast forward 20 years. The first person applies for jobs, starts businesses, tries new hobbies, and accepts that failure is part of growth. The second person hesitates, overthinks, delays, not because they lack ambition, because somewhere deep inside, mistakes still feel emotionally unsafe. Their brain isn't avoiding work, it's avoiding the feeling attached to the work. This explains something that confuses a lot of people. Why are some incredibly intelligent people constantly procrastinating? If intelligence were enough, this wouldn't happen. But intelligence doesn't silence fear. In fact, sometimes it makes fear louder. A highly intelligent person can imagine hundreds of ways something could go wrong. Every possible mistake, every awkward conversation, every negative outcome. Their imagination becomes a defense system. Instead of helping them act, it convinces them to wait, to prepare more, to think a little longer, until days become weeks, weeks become months. And the dream quietly stays where it started, inside their head. Here's another lesson many children unknowingly learn. My value depends on my performance. Maybe praise only came after success. Good grades, winning competitions, being obedient, being useful, being the easy child. Over time, achievement stopped feeling like something they did. It became who they were. That creates an invisible pressure. Because if success earns love, then failure must risk losing it. Now imagine carrying that belief into adulthood. Every project feels personal. Every interview feels like a judgment of your worth. Every rejection feels like proof that you're not enough. No wonder starting feels terrifying. You're not just risking failure, you're risking your identity. This is one reason self-worth and motivation are so deeply connected. People often think confidence creates action, but healthy self-worth creates confidence. If you believe you're worthy regardless of the outcome, you can take risks, you can fail, you can learn. Because failure doesn't change who you are, it only changes what you know. But if your worth depends on success, every action becomes emotionally expensive. The cost isn't just time. It's your self-image. Your brain notices that cost, and sometimes it decides it's safer not to play the game at all. Here's the strange part. Many adults are still chasing the approval they never received as children. Not consciously, but emotionally. The promotion isn't just a promotion. It's proof they're enough. The perfect body isn't just about health. It's proof they're worthy. The expensive car isn't just transportation. It's proof they've finally succeeded. The millions of followers aren't just numbers. They're evidence that people finally see them. None of these goals are wrong, but if they're trying to fill an emotional hole, no achievement will ever feel big enough, because the wound isn't external, it's internal. That's why some of the most successful people in the world still feel like imposters, still fear being exposed, still think they're falling behind. The child inside them is still waiting to hear, "You're enough." There's another childhood lesson that quietly shapes motivation. Comparison. Imagine hearing this throughout your life. Why can't you be like your brother? Look how well she does. Your friend already finished. At first, comparison feels motivating. But over time, it teaches a dangerous habit. Instead of measuring progress against yesterday's version of yourself, you measure it against everyone else. That's a race you can never win, because someone will always be faster, smarter, richer, more attractive, more experienced, more successful. And every time you compare upward, your brain concludes, why even try? Not because you're incapable, because comparison makes your own progress invisible. Think about learning to play the piano. If every practice session is compared to a concert pianist with 20 years of experience, you'll probably quit. But if today's practice is only compared to yesterday's, you'll notice improvement. Motivation grows when progress feels visible. Comparison steals that feeling. It convinces you that unless you're extraordinary, you're failing. And that's simply not true. Here's something almost nobody notices. Children aren't born afraid of looking foolish. Watch a toddler learning to walk. They fall, stand up, fall again, laugh, try again. No embarrassment, no shame, no inner voice saying, "Everyone's judging me. Everyone's judging me." That voice is learned. It develops over years of criticism, comparison, rejection, and social pressure, which means something important. If it was learned, it can also be unlearned. Not overnight, not with one motivational quote, but through repeated experiences that teach your brain a new lesson. It's safe to try. It's safe to make mistakes. It's safe to be imperfect. Those beliefs sound simple, but they have the power to completely transform how you approach work, relationships, and life. So if you've spent years believing you're lazy, maybe the truth is more compassionate. Maybe you've been carrying rules that were written before you were old enough to question them, rules that no longer serve you, rules your adult mind never consciously chose. The good news is that what was programmed can also be rewritten. The brain remains capable of change throughout life. It forms new connections, new habits, new emotional associations. But changing those patterns requires understanding one more invisible force. A force that didn't exist for most of human history. One that's quietly reshaping your attention, your motivation, and even your personality every single day. And it's probably sitting in your pocket right now. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world with no notifications, no endless scrolling, no short videos, no likes, no breaking news every 5 minutes, no messages demanding your attention, no algorithm deciding what you should see next, just silence. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, almost empty, but after a while, something unexpected would happen. Your mind would begin to slow down. Thoughts that had been buried under constant stimulation would finally have room to surface. You'd notice things you hadn't noticed in months, maybe even years. The strange part is that many people haven't experienced that kind of silence in a very long time. Not because they don't want to, because modern life rarely gives them the chance. For almost all of human history, attention was precious. If you heard a sound in the bushes, it could mean danger. If something unusual happened, paying attention could save your life. Your brain evolved to notice anything new. Psychologists call this the novelty bias. New things naturally grab our attention. A flashing light, a loud noise, a different face, a surprising headline. This instinct once helped us survive. Today, it's one of the most profitable weaknesses in the world. Every major app competes for one thing. Not your money, your attention. Because attention eventually becomes money. The longer you stay, the more advertisements you see, the more data you generate, the more valuable you become. This means thousands of engineers spend their days asking one question: how do we make it harder for people to leave? Not because they're evil, because that's the business model. And your brain happens to be perfectly designed to respond. Think about what happens when you open a short video app. You don't know what the next video will be. Maybe it'll be funny, maybe inspiring, maybe shocking, maybe boring. That uncertainty matters because your brain loves unpredictable rewards. Imagine a vending machine that gives you candy every single time. After a while, it becomes predictable. Now imagine another machine. Sometimes it gives you candy, sometimes it gives you two, sometimes nothing. Oddly enough, people often keep using the second machine longer. Why? Because uncertainty keeps the reward system engaged. This is the same principle behind slot machines, and it's also one reason endless feeds are so difficult to put down. Every swipe carries the possibility of finding something amazing. Your brain thinks, maybe the next one. Then, maybe one more. Then another, and another. Hours disappear without feeling like hours. Here's the strange part. After spending enough time consuming endless stimulation, normal life begins to feel unusually quiet. Reading a book feels slow. Studying feels boring. Working on one task feels frustrating. Not because those activities changed, because your brain's expectations changed. Imagine eating extremely sugary food every day for months. An apple might suddenly taste less sweet. The apple didn't change. Your taste buds adapted. Attention works in a similar way. When your brain gets used to constant novelty, ordinary activities struggle to compete. This doesn't mean your attention is permanently damaged, but it does mean your brain adapts to whatever environment you repeatedly give it. Researchers often describe dopamine as the motivation chemical, but that's only part of the story. Dopamine isn't simply about pleasure. It's deeply connected to anticipation, the chase, the possibility of reward. That's why opening your phone often feels exciting before you've even seen anything interesting. Your brain is anticipating something rewarding. A message, a funny video, good news, a notification. Even if nothing important appears, the anticipation itself keeps pulling you back. Now compare that to writing a report, or practicing an instrument, or studying for an exam. The rewards are real, but they're delayed. Your brain has to trust that today's effort will create tomorrow's benefit. That's much harder, especially when instant rewards are always one tap away. What most people don't realize is that attention is like a muscle. Whatever you repeatedly practice becomes easier. If you practice switching tasks every 30 seconds, your brain becomes better at switching. If you practice focusing deeply for an hour, your brain becomes better at focusing. Neither ability disappears overnight, but both strengthen through repetition. This is why many people say, "I can't concentrate anymore." Often, it's not because they've lost the ability, it's because they've trained a different one. The good news? The brain can learn again. Just as it adapted to distraction, it can adapt to focus. There's another invisible problem: comparison. For thousands of years, humans compared themselves to maybe a few dozen people, their family, their neighbors, their village. Today, before breakfast, you can compare yourself to the richest entrepreneur, the fittest athlete, the most attractive influencer, the smartest student, the happiest looking couple. the most successful creator, all in less than 10 minutes. Your brain was never designed for this. It sees hundreds of carefully edited highlights, then quietly compares them to your ordinary Tuesday afternoon. That's not a fair comparison, but emotionally, it feels real. You start believing everyone else has more energy, more discipline, more confidence, more purpose. Meanwhile, you're only seeing the parts of their lives they chose to show. No one uploads hours of self-doubt. No one posts videos of staring at a blank document for 40 minutes. No one proudly shares the projects they abandoned. You compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel and somehow expect yourself to feel motivated afterward. Here's where everything connects. Imagine your brain as a garden. Whatever you water grows. Every notification waters distraction. Every comparison waters insecurity. Every avoided task waters fear. Every small completed action waters confidence. Every moment of focused work waters discipline. Your brain isn't deciding who you become in one dramatic moment. It's changing through thousands of tiny repetitions, quietly, almost invisibly, every single day. That's both the bad news and the hopeful news. Because if small habits built the problem, small habits can also build the solution. Try this experiment. Tomorrow morning, don't touch your phone for the first 30 minutes. Not forever, just 30 minutes. Instead, sit with your thoughts, drink water, stretch, write one page, read a few paragraphs, go outside. Notice how uncomfortable those first minutes feel. That discomfort isn't proof you're weak. It's proof your brain has become accustomed to constant stimulation. And just like any habit, it becomes easier with practice. The goal isn't to reject technology. Technology is an incredible tool. The goal is to stop letting it decide where your attention goes every moment of the day. Because attention is more than focus. Attention is your life. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually shapes your identity. So maybe the question isn't, why am I so lazy? Maybe it's, what has my brain been practicing every day? That's a much more useful question. Because practice can change, patterns can change, even your identity can change. But changing doesn't start with finding more motivation. It starts with rebuilding something far more important: trust. Not trust in other people, trust in yourself. And once you understand how that works, you'll realize why some people stay consistent even when they don't feel motivated at all. That's where everything we've talked about finally comes together. Imagine you have a friend. Every Friday, they promise they'll help you move furniture on Saturday. Saturday comes, they don't answer their phone. The next week, they apologize. I was just busy. I promise I'll be there next time. The following Saturday, the same thing happens. Again and again. After a few months, something changes. Even if they sincerely promise to help, you no longer believe them. Not because you hate them, because your brain has learned from experience. Trust isn't built by promises, it's built by evidence. Now ask yourself a difficult question. If your brain saw you as another person, would it trust you? Would it believe your promises? I'll start tomorrow. This is the last time. Monday will be different. Next month I'll be disciplined. Your brain has heard those promises before. It doesn't listen to your words anymore. It watches your actions. And that's one of the biggest reasons motivation fades. Your brain isn't waiting for inspiration. It's waiting for proof. Think about how children learn. A parent doesn't say, "Trust me because I said so." Trust grows from thousands of small experiences. The parent shows up, again and again, when they're scared, when they're sick, when they need help. Consistency creates safety. Your relationship with yourself works the same way. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a tiny one, your brain quietly updates its belief. Maybe I can rely on myself. That belief is incredibly powerful. Because confidence isn't something you magically feel. Confidence is your brain remembering past evidence. This explains why huge goals often backfire. Imagine someone decides they're going to change everything overnight. Wake up at 5 a.m., exercise every day, read 50 pages, meditate, eat perfectly, quit social media, build a business, learn a language, never procrastinate again. It sounds inspiring. For about 3 days. Then life happens. They're tired. Something unexpected comes up. They miss one habit, then another. Within a week, the entire plan falls apart, and the brain learns the wrong lesson. See? We never stick with anything. Notice what happened. The failure wasn't caused by a lack of effort. It was caused by asking for too much, too soon. Your brain doesn't trust dramatic change. It trusts repeated success. Imagine trying to lift a car. Impossible. Now imagine lifting a grocery bag. Easy. Both involve strength. The difference is the size of the challenge. Habits work the same way. If your goal feels emotionally heavy, your brain resists. But if the goal feels almost too easy, resistance becomes surprisingly small. Instead of saying, "I'm going to read for 2 hours," read 1 page. Instead of saying, "I'm going to run 5 miles," put on your shoes and walk outside. Instead of saying, "I'm writing an entire chapter," write 1 sentence. At first, this feels ridiculous, too small, too insignificant. But here's what most people don't realize. The purpose of tiny habits isn't to impress anyone. It's to collect evidence. Every completed action whispers the same message. I keep my word. That sentence slowly rewires identity. Psychologist Albert Bandura spent years studying something called self-efficacy. It's a simple idea with enormous consequences. People act differently when they believe they can influence outcomes. Not because life becomes easier, because belief changes behavior. And where does that belief come from? Not from positive thinking, not from motivational speeches, from repeated experiences of success, even very small ones. Every tiny promise you keep becomes another brick in the foundation of self-trust. Miss enough promises, and that foundation cracks. Keep enough promises, and eventually your brain stops asking, "Can we really do this?" It starts assuming, "Of course we can. We've done it before." There's another shift that changes everything. Stop asking, "How do I become motivated?" Start asking, "What kind of person would naturally do this?" That's an identity question. Imagine 2 people trying to quit smoking. One says, "I'm trying not to smoke." The other says, "I don't smoke." The first person is fighting temptation. The second is protecting an identity. Identity is powerful because your brain naturally wants your actions to match the story you believe about yourself. If you constantly repeat, "I'm lazy," your brain unconsciously looks for evidence that confirms it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. We notice information that supports our existing beliefs, ignore information that doesn't. Miss one workout? See, I'm lazy. Forget one assignment? I knew I couldn't stay disciplined. But what about the days you did show up? Those moments often disappear because they don't fit the story. Now imagine changing the story. Not with fake positivity, not by pretending everything is perfect, but by telling a more accurate truth. Instead of, "I'm lazy," try, "I'm learning consistency." Instead of, "I never finish anything," try, "I'm becoming someone who finishes small things." Those statements leave room for growth, and growth changes behavior. This is one reason psychologist Carol Dweck found that people with a growth mindset recover from setbacks more quickly. They don't see failure as proof of who they are. They see it as information. Information can be used. Identity feels permanent. Here's something worth remembering. Your brain keeps score, not of perfection, of repetition. It doesn't ask, "Did you have the perfect day?" It asks, "What did you repeatedly do?" One missed workout won't ruin your health. One unhealthy meal won't destroy your body. One bad day won't erase months of progress. But repeating the same choices, that's what shapes identity. People often overestimate what they can do in 1 week and underestimate what they can become in 1 year. Quiet consistency almost always beats dramatic intensity because consistency earns trust. Imagine planting a tree. You don't dig it up every morning to see if it's growing. You water it, protect it, give it sunlight, then you leave it alone. Growth happens underground long before anyone sees it above the surface. Personal growth is exactly the same. Some of the biggest changes in your life will be invisible at first. Choosing to start instead of waiting. Keeping one small promise. Putting your phone away for 30 minutes. Finishing one task before beginning another. None of those moments feel life-changing, but together, they slowly become a different person. Not through one massive breakthrough, through thousands of ordinary decisions. So maybe the reason you've struggled for so long isn't because you're broken. Maybe you've been trying to solve the wrong problem. You thought you needed more motivation, but motivation comes and goes. You thought you needed more discipline, but discipline becomes much easier when your brain trusts you. The real goal isn't to force yourself to work harder. It's to become someone whose actions feel safe, familiar, and believable to your own mind. Because the opposite of laziness isn't endless hustle, it's self-trust. And once your brain truly believes that you'll show up, even in small ways, it stops fighting you. It starts working with you. That's when change stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like who you are becoming. If this changed how you see yourself, the next video will change even more.